Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to episode 135 of Star Wars Podcast What a Piece of Junk. I'm your host, Scott Butman, and joining me on a slightly sad note of this episode, as we discuss the passing of one Carl Weathers, it's my co host of the podcast, Mr. Derrick Marsh. Derrick, how are you?
You shall refer to me as High Magistrate.
Yes, High Magistrate Derrick Marsh. I like it.
No, I'm good. Obviously, still a little saddened by the news. Just it's still kind of less than 72 hours at this point as we're recording on Sunday, with the news of Thursday. But we really didn't get it till Friday, technically, when it hit the media.
Right.
So the family had made the announcement the following day. So, but yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But I'm doing good otherwise. Glad to get a episode of What a Piece of Junk with you guys, as we are going to be also talking about some upcoming videos and streaming of Star Wars here with Bad Batch Season 3 on the loom at the end of the month here.
That's right. We're only about 17 days away from the premiere of yet another Clone Wars influenced Star Wars animated show. So we can't discuss that without our very own Dave Filcloni, the gooey, chewy Mr. Miracle, man of a thousand nicknames, Nathan Miracle. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing fairly well. It's also saddened to hear about the passing of Carl Weathers. I know you guys know him from way more stuff than I do, but he was a major presence in The Mandalorian, and it will be sad to not see him anymore there.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just go ahead and get right into it with our farewell to Greef Karga and overall tribute to Carl Weathers. Of course, myself, like many members of my generation, I knew him first and foremost as Apollo Creed from the Rocky series of films. Just a landmark achievement of American cinema. The first Rocky was so much Oscar worthy, and seeing Carl Weathers portray like a mixture of almost every famous prize fighter that has ever been or had ever been up until that point, underestimating the everyman that was Rocky Balboa, portrayed, of course, by Sylvester Stallone. It was amazing, eye-opening. It was just a really incredible performance, and really showcased Weathers' ability to breathe life into what could be a cardboard cutout action hero. We associate him a lot with action films, but he had a lot of gravitas to him as well. He wasn't just some two-dimensional caricature of tough guy, soldier guy, athlete guy. Of course, he was an athlete in real life as well. Played in the NFL and several college sports, and had a good amount of success there also. Um, and uh, and I think I will often remember him as being a really funny guy because he had such a great sense of timing. I asked my wife, Mita, for her thoughts about it, and she said, of course, she's very sad that he has passed. She thinks of him these days first and foremost as Greef Karga, but also her other favorite Carl Weathers moment was when he was in Happy Gilmore with Adam Sandler, and he was hilarious in that role. So just a wide range of talent from the guy. Derek, what are your thoughts about the passing of an American cinema legend?
Yeah, it's my first introduction to Carl Weathers was actually through Predator. I mean, his four roles of Rocky were completed before really I was even watching television at the time because the Rocky 4 came out in 1985 and I was just 2 at the time. And
Yeah,
even though Predator came out only a couple years later, but then that's what I really remember his major role from. And then obviously Rocky to follow afterwards. I was obviously a bit more sci-fi junkie, even in my early
hmm
days. But yeah, no, just a lot of iconic stuff. I agree with you, right? The comedic acting had some really good timing. I mean, even with just the Mandalorian, right? There was some great chime points that he had in that where you could kind of see both things, right? Where he was taking the serious role and or the action role and then doing the comedy one-liners or bits, right? Especially with the magic hand thingy, right? We all like to quote that one.
Do the magic hand
So I
wave.
think
Yes.
that'll probably my number one quote from him. Other than he's part of it, but the other one that my iconic is when Arnold Schwarzenegger and him first face off in Predator, and he says, "You son of a beep," and they both do their grip like they're going to do a arm wrestling contest, and both flexing with both of their actual arms. That wasn't any stunt
Yeah.
doubles or anything like that. That was because, as you pointed earlier, he did truly play in the professional sports, specifically most known as a Raider. Obviously, Kevin Reitzel is knows him very well from his fandom of the now Las Vegas Raiders, but back then would have been the
Right.
Oakland Raiders. So, but anyways, yeah, just that, and obviously, yeah, his kind of return from fame for a little bit. I mean, he had done some stuff after Predator, but it was Chubbs as in Happy Gilmore, and then yeah, in Toy Story 4 where he plays Lieutenant Carl, was it? I think it was, or what was his
I
character's
think it
name?
was Lieutenant Carl. Yeah.
Yeah, Lieutenant Carl. But Lieutenant Carl was missing an arm, so
Right. Obvious Chubbs
Combat Carl.
reference there.
Yeah,
Combat
Combat
Carl. That's
Carl.
it. Yeah.
So that's what it was. But yes, but yeah, I mean, but still, tons of stuff. And then there's a lot of stuff. Being fans that we are video games, he did video game voice acting as well as other cartoon voice acting besides the Toy Story gig. So just a plethora of stuff. Quote unquote 80 credits as an actor that he did. So, and again, just one of those iconic voices. So when you heard him on cartoons and stuff like that, you could definitely pick him out. And yeah, just not side of the acting too, but just from what people said, right? From his directing on The Mandalorian to him just being on the premieres and stuff like that, just and then all the conventions that he did, the big one the last time he did was Star Wars Celebration last year.
Mhm.
And just a lot of people said he was just a truly fantastic being, very humble, very kind and generous. So again, pour one out, blue milk for Carl Weathers. We'll miss him.
Yeah, yeah, a whole stack of calamari flan worth of wisdom and love and peace from him. Nathan, I know you mostly know him from Star Wars and The Mandalorian.
Mhm.
Well, what are your thoughts of the passing of this guy?
Well, I guess my first exposure to him was apparently Happy Gilmore, but it's been so long since I've seen that movie that I forgot that he was in it. So
He
I,
plays Captain Hook, right? Because basically, the alligator ate his
That's right.
hand. So
Gotta get
I,
that gator.
you know, what I remember from Happy Gilmore is that golf was involved.
yeah.
So
Yes.
that that's about it. So really, I know him as Greef Karga. That was pretty much the only way that I knew him. I didn't even realize that he was in Toy Story 4. Um, but I could tell from his time in The Mandalorian how great of an actor he was. And one thing I really remember about him is when they were talking about the behind the scenes stuff with The Mandalorian and the volume and the actors being able to see things in the background in the volume. He talked about how that was great for him because he's used to being able to see things because he'd been an actor for so long. He remembered back when everything was practical effect and everything was in the shot. And nowadays, so much stuff is CGI. So often actors are acting against green screens. And he loved the fact that he got to act without a green screen, being able to see, this is the thing that I'm reacting to. And I thought that was a really interesting point because there were other actors there, newer actors, who are like, oh, well, we thought it was kind of weird because we're so used to acting with a green screen. That's how we're used to doing things. So it was neat to see the kind of the difference in the generations there.
Or if
So,
you're lucky, you'll have Andy Serkis there with a little black and white polka dot card on top of his head that shows you where to look for when they put the whatever Planet of the
yeah,
Apes or Smeagol, CGI.
Yeah. So since I do know him primarily from The Mandalorian, I'd like to say that I hope they treat his character well with however they write him out of the show. Frankly, I'm hoping that whatever building he's in gets destroyed by the Imperial remnants, and that there's a big funeral. And I really want the Mithril to show up and say some nice words about
Yeah.
his former boss slash captor, uh, preferably something dealing with handrails. Maybe he's implemented handrails on Navarro. It's a new
Yeah,
safety feature.
Navarro is the poster child for galactic OSHA now. You're going to have much more workplace safety because of Magistrate Karga.
And then there's a plaque that says High Magistrate Karga,
Mhm.
right? Would be right on the railing, right? So
Yes, and we
Oh,
have to
what
have
would
the
be
statue.
cool? Yes, the statue. What would also be cool is if they signed some important treaty, like in his office, after he's
Yes,
gone or whatever. That would be cool too. Yeah.
so that was going to be my question then, kind of leading into it. I mean, so then Nathan, are you against if they recast Greef Karga?
I really don't want them to recast that.
Okay.
They would struggle to find somebody who could capture that character the way Carl Weathers did. This is not a
Yeah.
scenario um,
Cara Dune.
like Balin. Well, yeah, it's not really a scenario like Cara Dune either. But I was going to say with Balin, we only got him for the one season, and he was quite frankly in the background for a lot of that season, in part because they
Yeah.
knew he had passed away. And I think that one would be fairly easy to recast. We've been with Magistrate Karga for longer. We've gotten to know more about him, and he really is Carl Weathers.
I dare
It-
say that was more famous than Balin Skull's actor, Ray
yes.
Ray
Stevenson.
Stevenson.
Mhm.
Stevenson. Yeah, I think I dare say that Weathers is more well known than Stevenson.
Yeah. So I think it would just be a lot harder to do, and I don't want them to try to do it because I don't think it would be done well.
Or since there
Yeah.
isn't a film, you don't want them to do deep fakes?
Well, I'm not really a huge fan of deepfakes in the first
Okay.
place, regardless of whether it's a film or not. I'm not a big fan of the Luke Skywalker deepfakes that they did. Uh,
I would be okay with a replacement Karga for a couple of minutes in the Mando movie, if they don't want to write him out. Of course, if they're gonna do the you know, virtual Karga in the movie, they won't be able to do all the things we just talked about with giving him a memorial and all that stuff in the next season of Mandalorian, unless the movie is set between seasons 3 and 4, which is entirely possible. But I
yeah,
actually kind of expect the movie to sort of be after all the seasons.
yeah.
Might
I
be
expect
wrong.
the movie to
I
be
could
an
be.
end cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is kind of we talked about last time, right? It just depends on which direction they're going because we know Favreau had already written season 4, and then we're assuming this movie is then depending on what it takes place, right? Is it going to be released before or after? Because obviously, that's really what's going to tell us, right? Is this just an endpoint to get us to season 4? At the end to cultivate, because it may be a test run of what then Filoni's doing, right? They want to see, people having to basically be kind of quote unquote forced to watch at least season 4, if not all of season 1 through 4, to be able to really understand a movie, right? Because it's no different than if you go in for any of the Marvel movies and you kind of just go in and watch Infinity and War and Endgame. I mean, yeah, it's doable, but it's not going to make a whole lot of sense on a lot of things, right? So, so what are they going to do with that? But we've talked about it, or is it, again, just kind of a big one-off adventure, right? Is it a 3 or 4 episode arc that they're just turning into a movie, right? So, but I agree. I mean, it just depends because the bad part too, though. I mean, obviously, it's something that's unfortunate and not non-preventable in this situation. But it's like we just got at the end of season 3 Din and Grogu getting the house and settling on Navarro, right? That's that was, I imagine, Greef Karga was going to have a reoccurring role of some sort in season 4, even if it's just to come in and just I need this or I need that, type to like
Right.
or maybe give me your underworld contacts, or or he was basically, even though he wasn't part of the bounty hunters guild, he was going to have, things for Din to go off in adventures and do, right? The things that we were hoping, that it was kind of get back into the roots of season 1. But who knows at this point now? So
Yeah, I think they could still have a situation where Greef is the guy giving him his assignments. They just, come on a data pad, or like Nathan was saying, the Mithril shows up and is all, "Hey, Magistrate Cargo wants me to tell you this," or
true.
a droid comes over and delivers a
Yeah, but I
message.
mean, they
But
could do they do that with Cara Dune anyways, right? They just kind of off-screen
yeah,
stuff or whatever, right? Or just say, with the whole C-3PO, Princess Leia, that with Ahsoka and all that stuff. Like, obviously, that there's ways to
right,
bypass it, yes, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I imagined if Carl Weathers was actually there, they wouldn't have done that, right? So they can get around the
yeah,
character, just the actual actor. So, nope, I'm with you
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
It's tough to do, especially with, and I agree with you, Nathan. I don't want to see it. Obviously we can get, him recurring in novels and comics, and to some degree, even potentially animation, right? We could get an earlier Greef Karga series, right? Like we talked about, instead of giving us just always Jedi tales, give us Cantina tales, right? And we could get a few episodes of early Greef Karga, how he became part of the Bounty Hunter Guild, right?
Yeah, and that is the one scenario in which I would be okay with recasting him. If we're recasting, oh, this is Greef Karga from 20, 30 years ago, and he's a much younger man. So, of course, he looks a lot different, maybe acts a little bit different, as long as it's close enough that you could reasonably say, well, I could see this person turning into Carl Weathers
Or
if
just
they,
animation, right? So,
yeah,
and it's
or
just voiced by somebody else, right? So, yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
yeah. Well, I could see a young Grief Karga series where we see him as a magistrate before he became disgraced magistrate. Like, what is it that caused him to be disgraced? And of course, if we do that, young Grief Karga would be played obviously by Michael B. Jordan
Yes,
because
yes.
he's in
he's
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 already
he's
done
already
the
playing
the
next version.
yeah, he's already played
Now he's
Cree
playing the
in
other
the
way.
Creed films. So now he play young Carl Weathers. It's like I'm gonna play Carl Weathers' son, and then later I'll play young Carl Weathers.
Yeah,
Perfect. Anyway,
and he could pull that off. He's good enough to do it.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
There we
All
go.
right, well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a much more interesting and perhaps much more lighthearted topic here, and that is the Star Wars Bad Batch Season 3, also known as Final Season, trailer has dropped, and so we're going to give our basic reactions to it. So if for some reason y'all haven't watched the trailer yet and you're listening to this episode of the podcast, pause us for a minute and then go watch it and come right back. All right, so I'm going to kick it off here. We'll let Nathan go last because he has a lot more to say about things. Overall, guys, I loved the trailer. It got me very hype about seeing another set of adventures with the Bad Batch. And I was sad to see that it was officially confirmed on screen that this is the final season. Now, we had pretty much had that confirmed in writing from various press releases and articles about it from Lucasfilm and Disney. But now it's been broadcast to the masses on an official trailer. This is the last season of the Bad Batch. That's probably for the best. I don't know how many stories they can tell with the boys this close to the rebellion. I mean, obviously they could come up with things, but you feel like if they are going to be that big of a presence in the galaxy, wouldn't they have been, hinted at or somehow interact with our heroes in the original trilogy as we get closer and closer to the momentous events of episodes 4, 5, and 6 of the Skywalker saga? Um, but I'm hoping that we get to see some kind of resolution for the questions about whether or not Omega is going to be rescued, whether she gets killed, whether she gets turned into some weapon by the Empire. Boy, wouldn't that be a downer of an ending? Or, and then also, how do these old clones deal with things? We saw a clone veteran begging for change on the street corner in the Obi-Wan series. So this is a theme that has begun running through the streaming series era, or what I like to call the new OG era, because Obi-Wan and the Bad Batch and Rebels, of course, are all set in and around the same time frame as the original trilogy. And so I think that the idea of war leaves behind all of these broken soldiers is also a big theme that Disney and Lucasfilm are exploring in The Bad Batch, and of course in a few scenes in Obi-Wan, and also in other media. So I like that story thread continuing to go through this as we see The Bad Batch talking about. I would have thought the end of the war meant no more having losses of our brothers, but apparently that's not the case for our guys here in The Bad Batch. And I'm excited to see how they deal with it. And it was also cool to see Asajj Ventress return. Um, so, having been made aware of the storyline in Dark Disciple, of course, I'm questioning wait, how is Asajj Ventress alive? And I'm proud to say that the people in charge at Lucasfilm took a moment to have one of the writers come out and say, don't worry, all of the stuff in the Bad Batch Season 3 is going to be in keeping with the story that happened in Dark Disciple. I don't know how they're going to pull that off, but Star Wars does really interesting things sometimes, especially in the realm of animation, where you can sometimes get away with things that would be cost prohibitive in quote unquote live action. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and also, of course, what the heck is Asajj Ventress up to in this story? Why is she here, and what is she doing? So that's probably one of my big question marks, and I'm hoping that we get to see something about her in one of the first 3 episodes because there will be a 3 episode premiere on February 21st. All right, so there's all my thoughts about the trailer. Derrick, what do you got?
So yeah, so watching it the first time when it was released, just about a week ago at this point, obviously, we had confirmed that the this was the final season, and looking at it, it was like, okay, it looks like they're going to bring it all together. They're going to, kind of end the story of the Bad Batch and potentially the clones, right? And there were some cool action scenes. There was a couple of funny moments, some serious moments. Obviously, the big reveal of Asajj Ventress, right, and all that stuff. To your point. Then, right before we started airing, we went through and rewatched it again, and I would say because I was able to watch it on my laptop here, where it's a little bit bigger screen than my phone. Plus, I also had the subtitles on for that, right, for the YouTube video. So, but I got really excited because watching it again, kind of refreshed, clean after watching it the first couple of times. When like I said, previous in the week. Uh, it got me excited because there's a tone in this season. Like this is going to be heavy. There's going to be some really good, not just action scenes, but some heavy topics that we've talked about before, relating to into even today's world, all the way, to previous, topics and specifically in American history, in the past 70, 80 years, right? All the way from World War II, all the way up to the Vietnam War and everything that happens there afterwards with the way, again, what we talked about in season 2, which is some of the episodes I liked the most when they were talking about how do they deal with these soldiers that are essentially left over, right? And there's a whole topic of well, they're just clones that are not really real people, right? And so you get this whole heavy topic here, and then you get some really good stuff from Palpatine when he's, going on there and they were trying to set him up and in the end he just does his manipulation, right? Which obviously has to happen to some degree because, we still got plenty more years of him in rule, right? Before we get even a New Hope and then his death finally and well, his first death, I should say, in Return of the Jedi. So, just overall, I'm excited because watching it, you can really see there's going to be some major deaths in here. I don't know if you guys caught it or not. There's in like the first 25 seconds or so, there's a scene which I'm pretty sure, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it's shown the high tower mountaintop of Pabu blown up and in smokes and in flames. And that's that, secret place that whatever Wanda Sykes character, I can't remember, takes them, right? And it's kind of this refugee and kind of a peaceful place. So obviously, the Empire is probably tracking down, as Rex mentions, right? They basically want the Bad Batch dead. That's why they're going to be fighting. You obviously see Hunter serious in that they have to go save Omega, right? And we see some scenes of that going on. And then again, you continue to see the emperor's poise in the Senate, right? And manipulating people and saying this is going to be the greatest, well, I can't remember the words, but the survivability of this, empire or whatever it is, in this moment or something like that. So just,
Right, he basically
obviously,
says nothing is more important than the survival of this new empire.
yes. So,
Yeah.
and obviously Ian McDermott voicing is just phenomenal on this stuff. So, but anyways, I'm super excited for what we're getting in this season. And again, it's going to be, I think it's 15, 16 episodes. So, I'm guessing obviously there's going to be probably in these first 3 episodes, since they're releasing it all at once, hopefully this is all the filler we get. Hopefully this is the let's just get people back into the mood of things, kind of say they had to do a mission or two for with Wanda Sykes, because obviously I'm guessing you could see them not even stopping to kill the troopers either, right? Before the first 2 seasons, they were always hesitant because they always anticipated being clone troopers. But this time they just shove them all off the cliff in the beginning opening action scene. So
Yeah.
they're at this point, they're either, they don't care if it's a clone or a non-clone, they know they're out to hurt them. So they got to fight back. But yeah, just, I hope that, like I said, this first 3 episodes is kind of gets us back in the mood. And then these last, 10 to 12 episodes is just straight, give us the good story. I'd rather have good story and just action when it needs to be. It doesn't need to be every episode. Give us good dialogue, story, and finish what's going to happen essentially with the Bad Batch by the end. Because I'm guessing that's what's going to happen, as part of half the episode of the prologue for the, end of this last episode, imagining, unless they just kill everyone. So, which they could. That's obviously on there. Anyways, sorry, take up, because I know Nathan's going to talk now.
Yeah. Fee Genoa is the name of Wanda Sykes' character. Fee, Phee. So yeah, not to be confused with Sid, who was Rhea Perlman in the earlier seasons. All right, Nathan, lay it on us, man.
Well, speaking of Sid, we didn't see Sid at all in this trailer. So I have no idea if we're going to address Sid at all, or if that character has just gone by the wayside. So it's interesting potential there of, negative potential. We might not see something. But I want to pick up on something Derrick mentioned about the Bad Batch just murdering Imperials, not caring. That's something that we had talked about and others had talked about, how the Bad Batch had been so cautious and always used the stun setting before, even when people were using the kill setting against them. And I think it comes down to, they know these aren't clones. Whenever they use their sun settings, those were situations where they either knew that they were going against clones, or there was at least a strong possibility that, these are our brothers. These stormtroopers are not their brothers. And I think that we're going to see that whole scenario play out throughout the season. I think that the big climax of the season is going to be that the Empire, and Palpatine himself particularly, wants to get rid of the clones, basically getting rid of the evidence. And that's going to be the big climactic battle at the end, is all the remaining clones versus the Imperials. And I think we're going to get sort of a Davy Crockett ending, where maybe we don't see our heroes die, but they're facing,
or 300, right? The 300 at the end.
Yeah, we're facing insurmountable odds, and it's obvious what's going to happen, and we just kind of fade to black. I could see that being kind of the finale of this. That said, I love the fact that we know that this is the final season. I love the fact that they knew that this was the final season going in, because the last thing I want from a show like this is some sort of cliffhanger ending that just never gets resolved. I want a complete story, and I think that's what we're going to get. But Asajj. So you mentioned Dark Disciple. I went back and double checked. I don't understand how they could have that storyline occur at this point in time in the timeline. Dooku is way too important to the storyline. I'm not going to go into details for people who haven't read it, but he's important, critically important, and he's very, very dead at this point. So I don't see how they could just pull that storyline in. I do see a possibility of, she didn't quite die, or she was raised by Night Sister magic. The end of Dark Disciple does actually kind of leave that open. There's some magic going on where they lay her to rest, and it's not clear what exactly is happening. So maybe they're having her resurrected, but I kind of want to see Quinlan Voss too.
that would be great.
Yeah, he's a big part of that story, and they made sure to give him a name drop in Kenobi. We know that he survived after the Purge, and we know that he went through the Way. So it might be interesting to see how that happened. Might even be interesting to see him leave that mark that Kenobi finds later.
Yeah.
But we didn't see him in the trailer, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to be there. We could still see him.
Well, Ventress is a much more recognizable character. She's been in a lot more on-screen stuff. I think if they showed Quinlan Voss, I mean, people like us would be like, "Oh my gosh, it's Quinlan Voss!" But
he's got the thing and the thing. Yeah,
he's got the thing, and his lightsaber is the anyway. But most people would be like, "Who's that guy?" So.
Yeah, that's true. And quite frankly, most people, in the circles that we run in, most people are going, "Wait, isn't Asajj dead?" But the vast majority of people out there are going, "Oh, hey, it's that girl from Clone Wars," and have no idea that she has died canonically.
Right.
Now we do realize, though, this is how they're going to bring a young Morgan Elsbeth into play, right?
That is a possibility. Yes.
That's great. I'm in for that.
So that's what I'm assuming they would do to Rezer, right? Then this is how she builds her connection with the sisters, in the space whales world that we and then eventually then we know then her contacts with Thrawn on his side and blah blah blah. So
which that raises
wouldn't happen yet, but yes.
I don't know what year relative to the Battle of Yavin, because that's how we calculate all years in Star Wars. I don't know what year this is.
Well, if you look at it, so Obi-Wan series is about 10 years after Revenge, because Luke and Leia are about 10 years old in the Obi-Wan series. And then so you would imagine that there's a clone there, to your point, right, that he runs into that's still kind of homeless. But again, there's no major clones running around anywhere at that point, right? So you would have to imagine that this is probably, and it's still relative to after Order 66 and all that happens, right? So I imagine it's probably each season's been a year or so. So maybe season 1 is a year after the first season, or Revenge of the Sith, and then season 2. So maybe we're talking 3 to 4 years after Revenge of the Sith is what I would guess. This is the point of it.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because I've recently been listening to Thrawn on ebook, because I got a new car, yay, and it can do ebooks. So I've been listening to Thrawn on the way.
And you have to drive into work, so it's perfect timing.
Exactly. And I was trying to figure out when that takes place relative to the Battle of Yavin, because it's actually shortly after the Empire is established. So Thrawn should be kicking around. He might not be an admiral yet, but he should be around during this time frame. So it's not impossible that we see that connection made in this season.
Oh, we see a young Thrawn as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
although I understand not putting Quinlan Voss in the trailer, leaving Thrawn as a surprise would be a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, connect, but it's Filoni, right? It's got to all connect at some point.
That's
so,
true. They did leave Luke as a surprise at Mando season 2, so
so,
it wouldn't
Did.
be unprecedented.
Yeah.
but I mean, obviously, but at the same time, though, it depends, right? To your point, right? Like, how do they do it? Like, if they res Asajj, would she then go find Quinlan Voss, right? Or is this a clone of Asajj? So, because that might be the whole point of what they're doing, right? On Tamburus, right? So, or not Tamburus,
Tantus, Mount
Tantus.
Tantus.
Thank you, Mount
Yeah.
Tantus. Yeah. So, that's what they could be doing, right? And that's what Palp wants the whole time, right? Recreating clones for Force users, right? So,
Yeah.
Well,
That's his goal. To get
and
not just to give himself a new body, but to have awesome soldiers.
mhm.
there is one more possibility that they just take the idea of Dark Disciple and say, okay, yeah, that didn't happen at that time, and take that story and put it here and have that as an arc in this season. You just have to replace Dooku with, okay, we're trying to assassinate probably Vader. But I have no doubt that Vader could kill Asajj Ventress.
Pretty easily, yes.
So, so that, I mean, but that would work. I mean, that would be the whole point. Would be Asajj would give herself up to save Voss. I said I wasn't going to spoil details, but I totally just did. Sorry
Well,
if you were
it's theory.
planning.
It's theory. Theory.
Sorry if you were planning to read this several-year-old book.
Well,
It's
more
10
than
years
several
old
now,
at this
but
point.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Several. The point is, they could take the basic structure of that story and move it to this time frame. They would just have to change a lot of the details to do it.
Just like the Ahsoka episode that we got in Jedi Tale season 1. I mean, they took the book and they took a majority of it. So yeah, I mean, there's very well, heck, this could be the first 3 episodes of the season. That's why it's just all one big arc.
It could also be a flashback, because it looks like Asajj is facing off against the Bad Batch, but we don't actually see them on the same screen at the same time.
Could be.
Yeah, and we do know that the Bad Batch knows where Count Dooku's castle is because that was like earlier in the series. They were over there at Dooku's castle as the Imperials were there to gather up Dooku's fortune or whatever. And I think they could go
Misdirection.
back. Yeah, they could go back and find some hologram, and they're playing the record of what Asajj did, and that's why we see her.
Yeah, that is very much possible. And then it could be if it's a flashback, it could be practically anything. Wouldn't necessarily have to relate to Dark Disciple at all.
Yeah. All right, whatever happens on the Bad Batch season 3, you can be sure that we're going to talk about it here on What a Piece of Junk.
And to conclude, though, too, there's one more thing, though, about this. It ends on the last episode, May 1st. So we got that 3 days before May 4th. So that's a thing to recognize, too. So
yes, Star Wars Day for this year.
So there could be a cliffhanger to upset Nathan here that ties into something, and then May 4th we get an announcement. Filoni has another cartoon series,
The Adventures of Asajj Ventress,
or I was gonna say, or Rex and Wrecker. Like, how do they end up being the odd couple, right?
I'm okay with that if they know going in that that's the deal. What I don't want is, oops, this turned out to be the final season and we weren't prepared for it to be the final season. So we have a storyline that we're just leaving unfinished. If it's okay, we don't resolve this, but it's because we have a plan to release it 3 days from now, that's not a problem.
3 days from now.
Otherwise, Filoni will have let us down, and you'll have to, I don't know.
I'll have to
go
eat my
sit
hat.
in a corner. Go sit in a corner, Nathan.
Yes.
Anyways.
Don't worry, we will graciously allow you to deep fry the hat first.
Oh, good.
That would make it at least somewhat chewable.
Everything's edible if you deep fry it.
Exactly. Well, whatever Nathan has to deep fry. I mean, no, sorry. Whatever happens on the Bad Batch season 3, you can be sure that we're going to discuss it here on What a Piece of Junk. But we're not the only game in town here on the Fandom Podcast Network. There's a whole bunch of other shows out there for various other interests and fandoms. And here to tell us about it is our friend Kevin.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our Fandom Flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. I hope you guys can check out those other podcasts and shows here on the FPN. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a time travel, if you will, and talk a little Star Wars Legends here on this segment of the podcast. And it's all due to an article that Derrick found earlier this week, or last week, I should say, that was titled 10 Ways That Star Wars Legends Made the Year After Return of the Jedi So Important. And the subhead here from David Miller over at Screen Rant: the year after Return of the Jedi is made incredibly important to the Star Wars Legends continuity thanks to a multitude of exciting stories. So now, to note, this is stories within the Star Wars universe set 1 year after Palpatine's death and the destruction of the second Death Star and Vader's death. It is not about stuff that happened in 1984. Just want to make sure I clarify that.
But we are a year after the 40th anniversary, though, so we're technically on par.
But the year
exactly.
1984 was hugely important for me personally, as it is the year I was born.
Yes,
Exactly.
and Nathan just celebrated a birthday not that long ago.
That is true. That is true. I hit the big 4-0. I'm not
Yay,
too
welcome
much
Nathan to
behind
the 40
Return of the
Club.
Jedi there.
So.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, subheads here, bullet points. The Star Wars Legends timeline, which was the official canon before its rebranding, set many important stories in the year directly following the events of Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. The Rebel Alliance, the Galactic Empire, briefly joined forces in the novel The Truce at Bakura to combat an invading force of the Sirok species, and the Galactic Empire fractures into warlord factions. The Rebel Alliance becomes the Alliance of Free Planets, and the Sith Order is revived by Palpatine's successor, Lumiya, who defeats Luke Skywalker. Dun, dun, dun. So, we're going to go through the 10 points here, and I'm going to let Derrick sort of drive the ship here, because this was his idea, and a capital idea it was. And Nathan is doing the thing where he didn't bother to prep for the show, so he hasn't read this list, and more than likely hasn't read any of the stories.
Well, I was just going to ask, is Nathan even familiar with any of this?
Oh, okay.
So this will be a lot of fun to have Nathan go, what? That's bonkers. Why would anyone? Yeah.
So there are 10 items on the list. What are we going to put the over under on Nathan has heard of or read them?
2.5.
2.5.
So I'm gonna go broader. 4 things on this list Nathan is aware of. I'm not gonna say has read them, but is aware of them
Okay.
because some of them have long lasting, repercussions even after
Okay.
the rebrand.
So
Anyway,
Scott's
yeah, take it
taking the
away. Take it away,
over.
Derek.
Scott, you're taking the over. Derek, you're
I'm
taking
taking the
under.
under. I'll take the under at
Okay.
2 and that.
Yep.
So, all right. So the first thing, which is what I'm assuming Nathan has heard of it because we have talked about it before, specifically with Kevin Reitzel, because him and I love this book. This is one of the first books that I actually read as a hardcover paperback, and I have to find it still. I believe I have it somewhere, but I could have donated all my Star Wars books many years ago and I can't remember. But I have to figure out where I put all this stuff. But the Rebel Alliance and Galactic Empire briefly joined forces in the Truset Bakura novel. So first of all, have you heard of the Truset Bakura novel?
I have heard of it. I have read it because
that's one.
back in the 90s, when I read the Thrawn trilogy, I checked them out of the local library, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library System. And they had the 3 Thrawn books, obviously. They also had a couple other books, and this was one of them. The other one had Night Sisters in it, and I remember Han getting his leg shattered by one of the Night Sisters.
I don't remember that one.
I can't remember the name of that book.
Scott should know this, right? Come on, Scott. You're our encyclopedia of library pull out. I don't know.
The Courtship of Princess Leia. That's
go.
what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people get Truset Bakura and Courtship mixed up because they have some similar story beats.
Yes, but they had both of them at the library, and I did read both of them. I didn't enjoy this one as much, but I did read it.
Yeah, this one's a long time ago that I haven't, like I said, I really wish I could take the time to revisit a lot of this. I've been picking up Audible books as well. I actually just repicked up my subscription back in December this year because I said, hey, even though I'm not flying as much, I'm driving more in my travels. I'm like, that's still fine because same thing, Nathan, right? You can pick it up and Bluetooth your car and all that stuff. I'm like, I need to get back into these. There's a lot of great Audible books of legend stuff that I still enjoy and would like to re-listen to these more than just listening. But this one, obviously, kind of, even though it was temporary, the idea that the Empire and the former Rebel Alliance, just as the Rebel Alliance, I guess the Alliance now at this point, join forces to basically fight the overarching enemy, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal, which was the I always pronounce this wrong, right? Was the invading forces of the Siruk, a species from the unknown regions.
I think it's Siruk.
Siruk. Okay, see, I'm not an English expert, so thank you, Scott. Siruk.
See, but this is an interesting point of your printed media. They don't necessarily tell you how it's pronounced. This is part of the reason why.
When, go ahead.
Joris, how do you pronounce his last name? Saboth?
I always did Saboth.
I always did
but
Kaboth.
Yeah, could be.
Or Prince Zizor.
You mean Prince Zizor?
I know.
Yep.
Or Exor.
Prince Zizor?
Prince Xylophone.
Yes.
So one of my major memories of the Truset Bakura was because I read it the same year that I read Heir to the Empire. Because I want to say they no, I guess I read it the year after Heir to the Empire. Yeah, because Heir to the Empire was 92, I believe, and this is 93.
I read them a couple of years after they came out, so I read them at the same time.
Indeed. Interesting side note, which I have said on the show before, but it was probably 100 episodes of the podcast ago. I bought the copy that I read initially of Heir to the Empire in the bookstore in the ground floor shopping center of the World Trade Center in New York City while on a school trip to see New York City. And ironically, I bought it, and then like 3 weeks later, the first time the World Trade Center got bombed by a truck bomb occurred, and the bookstore from which I had purchased Heir to the Empire was destroyed at the ground floor of the World Trade Center. Watching on television, I was like, oh my gosh, I was just there like a couple of weeks ago. It was terrifying. And of course, now none of that remains. But an interesting commentary about wars not make one great and violence in the system. But moving beyond that, I got this book later at that next year, 1993, and the species of enemies here that the Empire and the Rebellion work against, Rook, got me confused because for a minute I thought they were Nogri, and that's why Rook had the name Rook in Heir to the Empire as Grand Admiral Thrawn's bodyguard because they're spelled not exactly the same, but really close. But, upon further reading of the Truce at Bakura, if I remember correctly, these aliens very much reminded me of just like almost prototypical monsters. There was a series of Star Trek novels around this same time frame called Star Trek Invasion, which was about invaders from a different dimension, not the mirror universe, but something like that. And their passage of time happened differently in their dimension. So the 4 books in the Star Trek Invasion series spread across original series timeline, next gen timeline, Deep Space timeline, and Voyager timeline. So all of our big heroes at that moment in the 90s were able to fight the same enemies because they came across the dimensional barrier at various, different centuries or decades later. And so think I remember correctly that these things were very similar to those monster race in Star Trek Invasion. I'm about to go look that up while you guys pontificate
Well, that
about
would
your
be quite a
memories
few
of Troops of
years then
Bakura.
after this book came out then, because if you said it was for Deep Space Nine and for Voyager, that's mid to
Yeah,
late
Voyager wasn't
90s.
around in '93. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
So,
go look up the Star Trek Invasion
but
series,
but
and
I
maybe
was
I
going to
just
actually say
thought
that
about them.
the Cyrook would have been very formidable for what was coming out eventually in Deep Space Nine as the Dominion, right? Like you said, coming from a
Yes.
multiple, different quadrant of that, or whether it was, just because it was still just an unknown region, right? The Outer Rim, even farther than should say the Outer Rim. And again, this is
Star
why
Trek
we don't need.
Invasion happened. Star Trek Invasion happened in 1996, so that's
Oh,
what it must have been reminding me of Bakura.
gotcha. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, just but yeah, like I said, it's just when an unknown force comes out, right? Like in essence, we could still get that to some degree with the Ahsoka series, right? You could get that
Hmm.
to some degree with them doing the traveling that they did. They after, I should really say after Thrawn, right? But you could have it where this species from that time or that space timeline area, they traveling back and forth, they've left a rip hole or something like that, where then this other species could come travel, right, and try to take over the current galaxy, right? So again, this is after Thrawn, and the series wraps up there, but they could leave remnants of something like that to still take place then.
Well, and in the Thrawn book, Thrawn does tell Palpatine that there are threats to his empire that Palpatine doesn't know about yet,
Mm-hmm.
that are in the unknown regions. So this could be one of them. They could easily pull that back in.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I mean, because we know the Chiss in canon today, right, is still part of the current Star Wars galaxy. It's not part of the Space Whales galaxy, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they're just on the
Yeah.
outskirts of it.
Right. In the unknown regions, which takes up a significant portion of the galaxy.
Yeah,
Only about half the galaxy is actually explored in Star
yeah,
Wars.
yeah. And again, the main galaxy without going to another
Right.
galaxy.
Right.
So, because that would have been the thing, right? Like they can know because they could travel in theory to those galaxies, since they're a little bit closer than even with them going to Coruscant or something, right? Because they're caught in the middle, right? They're on the border of one galaxy to the other, right? In essence, but yeah. So overall, this was a major, and again, it was a phenomenally written book, right? Like I said, this is one that, besides the Timothy Zahn novels for Thrawn and some of his other well-known Star Wars Legends books at this point, this is probably one of the top 5 books that people would come out and say that, oh yeah, Truce of Bakura, right? Like I remember that, or yeah, I know exactly, all the events. And this is one of the major ones. Again, it was just, something where, a giant threat after the Empire, and what can be it, right? Oh, it's some unknown, unknown to us that's posing a great threat. Because they were
Cyrok were reptilian. They
yeah, I
were
would
a
say they were
reptile race,
reptilian,
and they
but
were
they
big
had
on
psychonetic powers.
they were big on mind control, enslaving people with
Yes. Yeah.
like not nanobots, but something similar to nanobots. And one
Okay.
of the big things they wanted to do was put the technology, their slave technology, into Luke himself because of his mastery of the Force, and then they could use him to mind control a bunch of other people, enhancing their slave pool because they viewed all the non-reptilian races as inferior to them. So they were like, well, we should be in charge, and that's how they conquered other star systems and so forth. And Truce of Pakor is also famous because it was the first time, I'm pretty sure the first time, if not one of the first times, that the Force ghost of Anakin Skywalker appeared to Luke or Leia after Darth Vader's death. And in this case, Anakin's ghost appears to Leia and asks her to forgive him for all the horrible stuff that he did as Darth Vader. And so Leia has to wrestle with, gosh, what am I going to do? Because this is 4 years after the Battle of Endor. She's only just now coming to grips with the fact that Darth Vader was her real father.
Yep. All right. Number 9 was the rebellion becomes the Alliance of Free Planets. So basically, it's rather than becoming the New Republic, they become the Alliance of Free Planets, which is essentially what the Federation is to some degree. So taking on that, it basically said the Alliance member worlds collaborated to restore democracy while avoiding the pitfalls of the Galactic Republic. But we all know how that goes, right? So, because unfortunately, you can't even do it in a planet, yet alone a galaxy of planets. So,
yeah. And so this of course is from the Marvel Comics series that was
yes.
still going on after Return of the Jedi, and it was the same Marvel Comics series that had started in technically 1976. A lot of people don't realize this, but first issue of Star Wars Marvel Comics was before the movie came out, which is why wacky things happen like Luke's lightsaber is, or Obi-Wan's lightsaber is red, and so on and so forth. And then later Luke has the yellow lightsaber, and you're like, why is his sword yellow? And Kenner doesn't help because they made the action figure with a yellow lightsaber because anyway. So yeah, this is in, I don't know what issue of the comic it's in, but it's very near the end of the initial Marvel Comics run. And the whole Alliance of Free Planets only happens for just a little while, the first meeting of which is actually on the forest moon of Endor. And while they're there, they kind of, it's almost like in American history with the uh, League of,
Articles of
what was it?
Confederation.
Thank you, Nathan. Articles of Confederation, which eventually got replaced by the United States Constitution. So yes, the Alliance of Free Planets gets replaced by the New Republic shortly.
So Nathan, did you know that the one of the things that they became instead of the New Republic or the Grand Republic was the Alliance of Free Planets?
I feel like I've heard the name Alliance of Free Planets before, and I am aware of the fact that there are Marvel comics. But overall, I'm going to go with no. I was not aware of this one because it would not. It's more of a that sounds vaguely familiar, not a oh yeah, I recognize that.
Okay, so Scott, were you totally into the comics and buying as much as you could or reading stuff, or not really
So
much?
I had moved on at this point in time, comic book wise. I had moved on to where the only two comics I was buying from Marvel were Transformers and GI Joe. So when Marvel Star Wars finished with their adaptation of Return of the Jedi, I stopped like reading it. I stopped looking at it, and there was a little while when I was around 8 years old until I was about 12 years old, so about 4 years there, where I kind of wanted to do anything but Star Wars because I had done that as a kid. And when you're a kid and you want to start proving to people that you're growing up now, you stop playing with stuff you played with as a child. Well, for a little while there, especially Ewok era, I was not into Star Wars, and I wanted to do more serious stuff like GI Joe.
Until they
Nudge,
came out
nudge,
with
wink,
Cobra
wink.
Commander becomes a snake, and
Yeah. Then 1986 happened and Cobra La and whatnot, and I was like, oh man, now what am I gonna do? And that's when I took a big foray into DC and was big into Justice League and stuff. So,
Justice League and
because
Serious Batman.
yeah, exactly. And then Batman became like really dark. I only wear black and really, really dark gray. Right.
And
So,
I talk like this even though I'm a comic and you can't hear me.
yeah. Round about 1989, Michael Keaton Batman. I was like, oh yeah, this is cool and edgy and whatnot. And then when I got to high school, I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm gonna like what I like. And I got way back into Star Wars and Star Trek. So there you have it.
There you go. All right.
Uh,
So basically you're saying you don't have any of these comics lying around. So
Do not have any of the comics involving the Alliance of Free Planets. But I did buy the reissue a few years ago. Gosh, like actually, I think it's 2015. I think it was 2016. I bought the reissue, which has the Legends banner. Actually, speaking of Star Wars Legend, of the reprint of the final issue of the original Marvel Comics run, which went way on into the future from Return of the Jedi and lasted much, much longer than I thought it would. And was not a bad comic, even just to read the final one as a reprint.
there you go. All right, number 8, the Galactic Empire fractions into Warlord fractions, which to some degree that's what we have currently kind of going on to, in with the whole, Moff Gideon and Admiral Thrawn and what the little pockets of each, kind of remnant empire, whatever you want to say, Admiral or Moff or whatever they're doing. With current factions and who's controlling what, to even some degree of what the Trade Federation and separatists and all that, what they were doing, right? Kind of echoing the similarities there, where one controlled the bank and one controls the weapons and one controls the, military ships and, one controls the ground assaults and all that stuff. So, but so Nathan, did you know much about this here, where they have multiple factions split up for the Imperials, kind of where they typically fight amongst each other as much as they fight the Rebel Alliance, it seems like?
Yes, I'm going to go with yes on this one.
Okay.
I did know that the Empire split into multiple factions. Part of that was covered in the Thrawn trilogy, because there were several factions of Imperials, and Thrawn kind of pulled some of them together and kind of
Unite the clans.
United. Also, the former rebels. Leia talked about how the Empire is all fractured, and we don't really have to be all that concerned about them because none of them are working together. And then all of a sudden, Thrawn starts winning these military victories, and that comes as a surprise because the Empire is so fractured. Also, there is a name here that I particularly recognize: Yasan Isard. That comes from the Mara Jade books, which were also written by Thrawn.
By Thrawn.
Timothy Zahn.
Yeah.
Zahn, Thrawn, same guy.
I mean, honestly, Tim's last name does make him sound like he's a Star Wars alien. Let's be real.
It does. I'm starting to remember more books that library had, because they also had the Mara Jade books.
The question is, do they still have the books?
I don't know.
I should hope so, right? I mean, unless they just sort of gave out and
I mean, that'd be
collapsed, or
30 years later. At some point, they either have to expand or the old books get replaced with new books, and I'm assuming they're not getting new versions of these books.
I checked them out of the library so many times, it may have disintegrated.
Yeah, he's dog-eared all those copies.
You mean they just didn't give it to you for free, like in Beauty and the Beast, when Belle just reads it so many times it gives them the free?
Surprisingly, they did not. But my standard checkouts were always the Star Wars books and the Star Trek movies.
Cool.
The classic Star Trek movies.
All the classic Star Trek movies.
Were you renting them on DVD or VHS?
VHS.
VHS in the 90s.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, one of the first places I saw a DVD
super confusing, because I had not seen the original series.
Oh, I was the same way, Nathan. I love the classic movies probably more than I love most anything else, but I really don't care for the classic as a series. I'm more of a TNG and Deep Space Nine.
Well, now I love the original series of Star
Oh,
Trek.
okay.
Just-
There you go.
I had no clue who these people were except through the movies. Then when I went back and
Wow.
watched the original series, I'm like, so where are half of the characters I'm familiar with from the movies? Because like Chekhov's not in this one. Sulu's not
Yeah.
in this one.
There you go. No, some of these definitely are a little bit. I was the same thing. Hassan Nassard, very well known for being cross multi book platform. So
Yeah, my most impactful memories of these individual Imperial warlords and factions were from video games at the time, and you can see in this article here the third photo is of two screenshots from various 1990s really badly polygoned video game characters of various Imperial warlords. So yeah, I knew about it from a lot of video game stuff like Dark Forces and Jedi Knight and that kind of thing.
yep. Well, going back to comics, number 7 was Palpatine's Sith successor revives the Sith Order and defeats Luke Skywalker. This one I'm not too much because I'll be honest. I mean, I love comics, but I mean, this was, probably still early 90s, I think. It doesn't say when this one came out. But the way the artistry is done, it would have been something I wasn't too keen on. I was more Marvel comics, the actual MCU, or I shouldn't say MCU, just Marvel characters comics of
Marvel
Avengers,
comic universe. Yeah.
the Avengers, Iron Man, those types of things, Captain America back then. So
Like we comic book nerds at the time, especially heading into the 90s, we started to separate ourselves into sci-fi, mystery, dark comics, or supers, or some people just said capes. And like, I don't read supers or I don't read capes became like a
I
thing, or
love
I'm a
sci-fi.
serious
I
comic
love
book
the
collector.
Predator and
Yeah,
Alien series from Dark Horse because it was so graphic.
yeah, yeah. I am familiar with this character, Lumia, and I do recall, I want to say a cover or two that had her on it of a Star Wars comic because, I was reaching the age where if you put a girl on the cover, I was probably going to look at it more than once. And so, interestingly, this was during the time frame in the late 80s or mid 80s where if you had some sort of half robot or cybernetic or cyborg character, it was always a much cooler moment or a cooler thing to insert into your comic. Cross reference here over in DC in the Teen Titans with the guy called Cyborg. He was a big, big deal because, oh my gosh, that guy's half robot, right? And it's weird because we didn't always think about Darth Vader as being half robot back in those days because unless you read a lot of novels or comics, in the movies, they made a big deal out of him having the robot hand. And of course, in Return of the Jedi, we saw him take the helmet off and he had all the stuff implanted in him. But most of the time, people didn't think about Darth Vader being a cyborg. They just thought of him as a guy who wore a suit of armor, right? And so I don't know why, but when you had this girl, Lumia, and of course, Valance, the cyborg bounty hunter in Star Wars Marvel Comics in the 70s and 80s, it was a really big deal to reveal that, oh my gosh, that part of him is robotic, especially for Valance because I think I'm saying his name right. Anyway, he had a big time hatred of droids. He was like almost droid racist, as it were, which of course was a huge reveal that, oh my gosh, but he's part droid himself. He's cyborg, so he's got the self loathing thing going on. So he was like a really intimidating bounty hunter. And this Sith Queen, Lumia, was of a similar bent about, very intimidating and determined to defeat Luke Skywalker and take revenge of the Sith.
I see what you did there. That
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with this character at all. I'm familiar with the three-eyed clone of Palpatine, but not this
Mhm.
character.
She looks like a ninja from G.I. Joe.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, but she should be battling Snake Eyes, not Luke. So
Yeah, yeah.
All right, number 6. So we're just about halfway here. The Alliance heroes go to war with extragalactic invaders. Again, still at the comic book series here. There's the Nagai and the Toph species who come from the neighboring galaxy known as Fire Fist. Invaded the main Star Wars galaxy, with the Nagai initially siding with Lumia Sith, an Imperial faction, before siding with the Alliance. The Toph were ultimately defeated, and Lumia was presumed dead, though the Sith lady, in truth, went into hiding, refining her power in the dark side and plotting her revenge. So, again, it sounds more like just linking together on everything.
Shenanigans. They didn't actually have 10 things. They split this one into 2.
True. So this was well beyond the time that I was reading Star Wars comics. Like I said, the storyline continued after Return of the Jedi adaptation, and as you can tell from the artwork here, gentlemen, went to some weird places. Some of these starships from the Toph and the Nagai look like they were designed by Dr. Seuss. I mean, it's just wacky. And I remember there being
it's like literally a giant engine with the pistons coming out of it, like it's gonna suction tube you up, and then you go into a gerbil playpen. So,
and it was very much a case of, we don't have anything official from George Lucas as to what happens in the galaxy afterwards, but we also have been told that there might be more Star Wars movies someday. So the writers at Marvel, very clearly, even to me as a child, were doing this thing where they were telling stories happening over here, not part of the main Star Wars galaxy.
Even though Luke was in everything.
Yes, of course. And Han and Chewbacca.
And Leia, yeah, I know they're all
and Princess
involved.
Leia, yeah. Actually, Lando had big roles in the comic. Lando did a whole lot of stuff because he was such a roguish, basically space pirate already. They had
you get to draw Billy D. Williams. Why wouldn't you want to?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I did not read this comic, and I probably couldn't have told you the names of the Nagai and the Toph if you offered me $1 million. Until we.
But now you do know it. So.
But now I do know. So anybody
Ken Jennings comes back to you.
My way.
So. Yeah, no, if you tell me Toph, I'm still not thinking of this. I'm thinking of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, I was going to say, I was thinking of Toffee. So. All right, well, so let's go to number 5. So the Alliance of Free Planets. So we're reusing something, Nathan. So they couldn't even come up with 9. They're at less than 8 now. The Alliance of Free Planets evolves into the New Republic. So.
Oh, yeah. Following the Nagai Toph War. Oh, yeah. Talk about padding the count here. The Alliance of Free Planets finalized its transition into the New Republic, achieving the ultimate goal of the Rebel Alliance by restoring the Republic's democracy. While not directly depicted in a Legends-era Star Wars story, well, then why do you have it on this list? The Declaration of the New Republic, nevertheless, is one of the most important galactic events following Return of the Jedi. As shown throughout the Legends timeline, however, the New Republic would continue to wage war with the various successors to the Galactic Empire for 15 years after the Battle of Endor. This one literally says that it wasn't shown. This is just something we're assuming happened because later we called it the New Republic.
Now, they do reference in some of the later books about the year in which the New Republic was founded. And so the author here probably worked backwards to whatever the star date, if you'll pardon the Star Trek term, was for that Nagai Toph War, and realizing, I guess after that war, they realized, hey, maybe we ought to make this a more permanent thing. And so, I enjoyed the one tidbit in this paragraph, though, where they talk about how they would fight the leftovers, basically, of the Galactic Empire for 15 years after the Battle of Endor. God, could you imagine if people were still fighting, mopping up from World War II in 1960? It would have been a nightmare.
I mean,
the scale here is so much bigger.
You could make the argument that the entirety of the Cold War is mopping up after World War II.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe, but I guess more what I had in mind was, were they still fighting Nazis, mopping up Nazi pockets here and there?
Okay.
Because yes, it is definitely an offshoot of World War II with Stalin and the Soviet Empire. But but I feel like that almost was going to happen no matter what. That I feel like we were put on that course of conflict when the Bolshevik Revolution occurred in Russia. But that's a whole different podcast. And so, yeah, I enjoyed the actual figure here of 15 years. And so, of course, now current 21st century Star Wars fans are watching this 15-year battle with the remnants of the Empire play out in a different way, but over all the streaming series, with the Mandoverse, because that's basically the same time frame.
Yes. So, all right, let's do number 4. Now, this one I'm banking possibly, but we'll see if Nathan knows it or not. So, Luke Skywalker meets Palp's son and grandson.
I've already told you. I've already told you in this podcast a few entries ago.
I know. So officially, I'm out of the running because he's hit 3. So
yeah.
But yes, no, this one is the 6th book Jedi Prince Junior novel series by Paul and Hollis Davids. Continues the fledgling New Republic's conflict with the Empire's warlord factions. So at least it's not rehashed stuff at this point.
That is true. At least that is true.
So, but it introduces the descendants of the Emperor. The human Umbarian hybrid known as Triclops is the Emperor's son. Though his weak connection to the Force and unsuccessful dark side training led Palp to condemn him to enslavement in the spice mines of Kessel. On Kessel, Triclops would fall in love with the former Jedi Kandalian and have a son, Ken, not to be confused with Barbie and Ken, who had a strong connection to the Force like his mother and grandfather, though he would go on to join the New Republic.
So you can easily see that several of these ideas were recycled in in the sequel trilogy era, because we have basically Palpatine's son who doesn't have a very good connection to the Force, and so his dad is all like, "You're dead to me," and so just sends him out there, Although I don't think that Palpatine's son in the official sequel trilogy timeline gets banished to the spice mines of Kessel, like
But we
Triclops
don't
like,
know that he wasn't.
Triclops does. But yeah,
we don't know he was.
We don't know that he was, but we don't know that he wasn't. And we don't know that his wife was a former Jedi, but she could have been.
Well, didn't they have the dagger?
Yeah, the Sith dagger. Yeah.
So,
well, no, Ochi had the Sith dagger.
Well, now didn't Uchi take it from them, right? Or Ochi.
I thought that he was given the dagger so that he could find his way back to the reborn Emperor.
I mean, I've only seen Rise of Skywalker twice, so you guys got to help me here. What?
My understanding was that
during a flashback during that film.
That's true.
I'm having a flashback of a flashback of a flashback.
My understanding was that Ochi was given the dagger so that he could find the Wayfinder, so that he could find his way to the to Palpatine to receive payment once he had completed his mission.
Okay, I thought that he took the dagger from Rey's parents so that they couldn't find the Wayfinder to get to Exegol. But you're probably right though, Nathan.
You know what? Maybe I'll just have to watch that movie again because I have also only seen it twice, and it is the Star Wars movie I have seen the least out of the live action movies.
Yeah,
there you go. That's your homework for before our next episode.
Unless you count the holiday special, but it's not completely live action.
Plus, it's not really a movie.
That's true.
It's an extended television episode.
It's a special.
Anywho,
now,
getting back to the topic at hand, Jedi Prince. I didn't read these because I considered myself at that time no longer in junior novel territory, but I was familiar with the term Triclops. However, it was a derogatory term most of the time in my EU days, where people referred to stories like this as reasons why it's great that the expanded universe got erased because some of it was real dreck.
Yep.
What do you guys recall about this?
So I actually didn't read Jedi Prince, the junior novel series. I know this guy from something else. The Essential Guide to Characters in Star Wars, which told me a lot about a lot of characters that I didn't know anything about. So I had two of these books. One was the Essential Guide to Characters, and one was the Essential Guide to Ships. And he was obviously not a ship, so he was in the Essential Guide to Characters one.
Should have been a transformer then.
And I read the entry on him and thought, this sounds really, really bad. So I never went and read those novels, and I think I'm glad. but I am familiar with the character.
I never read them for the reason that I said, and then also, of course, plenty of my contemporaries were like, "Oh God, don't! It's horrible," you know.
All right. Well, we'll skip it since it's horrible. So, 3, and this one, this was the
work of reading this.
Yeah, this was.
Oh, now see, you knew I knew this one too.
Yeah, this was the one of the two things. I assumed you knew True Sepultura, and I definitely knew you would know this one, just because it is also officially a Decipher SWG CCG card.
One of my favorite cards, because I love the card Hidden Weapons, and he specifically has the line "may use hidden weapons."
There you go. So this one is Boba Fett escapes the Sarlacc twice and hunts down his impersonator, and his impersonator is Jodo Cast. And here's a little bit of tidbit I just learned this past week, because somebody was posting in the Star Wars CCG Facebook group. They were trying to see about getting the full picture of Jodo Cast because they wanted to cosplay. And apparently the only full-fledged photo they actually have of Jodo Cast is the one in the comic here. And if you look at this comic of Jodo Cast, this color pattern is basically almost the same exact as Boba Fett, but just slightly more uglier colors, versus the one that you get in the actual card game. And for most of us that know, well, for the premium Reflections 2 premium cards that they introduced from the Legend stuff that they did, typically they got live actors to recreate these photos. But this one specifically, they didn't. It's actually just legitimately Boba Fett, and they just recolored it for that Star Wars CCG card. So there's your little bit of hidden trivia. So anyways, this would be the iconic Mandalorian bounty hunter Boba Fett, when we all knew he was really badass before Book of Boba Fett. And he escapes the Sarlacc pit twice. The first instance was short-lived, as shown in the Marvel Star Wars comics, but after a second and successful escape, Fett would learn that another bounty hunter, Jodo Cast, or Timothy Olyphant's Cobb Vanth, was impersonating him. Despite lacking Fett's skills and not being a true Mandalorian like Fett, as shown in Andy Mangels and John Nadeau's comic Boba Fett, Twin Engines of Destruction. Boba Fett methodically hunted down, humiliated, and executed Cast, though he would not reveal a second escape from the Sarlacc to Han Solo until 10 years after the Battle of Yavin.
So you have to call it Twin Engines of Destruction because this is the 90s and everything's extreme. It was a great comic. I read this multiple times back in the day.
Do you still own it?
Dark Horse. I don't have it anymore. No, I wish I did. This is when Dark Horse had taken over the license for Star Wars comic books. And again, it's the 90s, so everything became dark and edgy and extreme and over the top. And yeah, there's some pretty violent stuff. We put the war in Star Wars, baby.
All right. Well, I'm happy to say so far Nathan's hit 4. So if he knows any of these last two things, when we get to 1 and 2, then you lose as well, Scott. So anyways,
Nathan, feign ignorance, stricken dumb, go.
So, but Nathan, what do you know from Jodo Cast though, or anything from this, or just Jodo Cast from the Star Wars card game?
I mainly know him from the Star Wars card game because, like I said, he can use the card Hidden Weapons, which is a picture of Boba Fett using the grapple line that he ties up Luke with, which makes no physics sense how that thing knows how to go around Luke like that. But you know what? It's Star Wars. We can have the Force or we can have physics. We choose the Force.
It's just a little dodgy ball.
Yeah.
Because that's what we used to do at school when you're going around the pole.
It's a tether ball.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
tetherball.
tetherball,
But
weaponized
he
tetherball.
fires the thing straight at Luke, and then it curves around him. But there could be a little droid on the end of it that's
It's
flying
a
around.
whispering
Well, you see, the magnetic field of the
minnow
whistling birds is
or whistling birds.
inverted so that the polarity
Yeah.
shift makes it attracted to the cord and then repelled from the cord, then attracted to the cord, then repelled from the cord.
So,
cycle of-
anyways, what I was saying is that card would allow you to capture your opponent's personnel characters. Sorry, wrong game. Still Decipher. Capture your opponent's characters before Battle Destiny was drawn, which meant they didn't apply their force ability to drawing Battle Destiny. So sometimes I would win battles really big because, you've got Luke Skywalker and Jar Jar Binks. Just kidding. You only have Jar Jar Binks because I captured Luke Skywalker.
But let's be honest, we know Jar Jar Binks would still win the entire thing.
No,
Even if
then
he
I
didn't win, though, Jar Jar would survive.
well see. I tended to play my own decks against each other, so usually Jar Jar got fed to the Rancor
Oh,
because I could set that up and make sure it happened.
you played the "Shut Up Wesley" but "Shut Up Jar Jar" card on him.
But then Anakin would win the pod race, and the light side would still win the
because pod racing was broken.
only
It
a
was,
little.
especially if you had Anakin's Pod Racer.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, again, not this podcast. So yeah, great comic. Anybody out there who wants some homework, I believe you can get Boba Fett Twin Engines of Destruction in a Star Wars comic app somewhere, I think. Now,
Probably
if you
off the
want
Marvel
physical version.
you probably get the Marvel
Well, I believe
app.
I think that Marvel didn't they get the rights to digitally do all the Dark Horse stuff too, right?
That's what I'm saying. I thought Marvel app could have all of it.
Yeah, I think so. But as Derrick was implying, finding this as a physical comic is not quite as easy these days. I should
eBay.
look this up while you go on to number 2.
Okay.
Let me
Number
see how much
2,
it goes for on
Luke
eBay.
Skywalker resigns from the New Republic military. Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor. Did you ever read that novel?
Nope.
Okay.
I-
Well, it was a
I have
novel by
not read-
Matthew Stover.
Yeah, I have not read this novel either.
Not familiar
This
with this
one-
one at all.
Yeah, this one is Luke Skywalker clashed with the prophet of the dark side known as Chronal or Black Hole. I don't know where you get Black Hole from Chronal, but okay. Who was once the director of Imperial Intelligence. While formidable, Chrono's forces were defeated by the combined might of the New Republic and their Mandalorian allies.
Hey, check
so-
that out.
Though the battle was extremely costly. Luke Skywalker was sickened by the cost of life and subsequently resigned from the New Republic military to focus on Jedi knighthood, though he would continue to serve the New Republic informally and was allowed to keep his X-Wing AA-589. So, all right. So nothing on that one. I'll skip to the last one. And this one I wasn't sure if Nathan would know or not. But obviously this is the one that can break or make Scott. And I'm betting at this point, Nathan probably knows this story because it is a video game. So Kyle Katarn defeats Derrick in the Valley of the Jedi from Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2. So Nathan, you played Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2?
I did not.
But did you know this?
That was not a Nintendo game.
It was a
and-
PC.
And to
Yep.
yeah, well, I didn't really play
You
a
are-
lot.
you
The
are
only
correct.
the only PC Star Wars game I really played was Star Wars Galaxies, which wouldn't be on this list because it took place during the Galactic Civil War, not after the Battle of Endor. So I'm to help Scott out. I'm going to say no. I knew nothing of this game. I have heard of it, but know nothing beyond that. I clearly don't know who Kyle Katarn is, and I've never seen him in any of the Fantasy Flight game LCG cards, or the X-Wing game that Fantasy Flight Games did that now Atomic Mass Games has. Yeah. But you know what? I'm going to say I don't know who Jarek is. Well, no, he was in the LCG too.
But you would know who Darth
Yeah.
Bane is.
That is true. I would know who Darth Bane is. So halfway, sort of.
Well, what's weird is that, I mean, a majority of this a millennium before the Star Wars Skywalker saga, but apparently this is supposed to take place a year after Return of the Jedi.
Well, no,
Yeah.
but see, he's setting up the reason that Jarek wanted to go to
I
the
know.
Valley of
I
the
know.
Jedi.
But it's
Yeah.
just funny because it's mostly a flashback, right? So, but anyways,
It is, but when by the time Kyle Katarn and Jarek get there, it is post Return of the Jedi,
correct.
and so Jarek has this whole idea about I'm going to become the most powerful Sith user ever. Personally, having played the game and defeated Jarek, of course, I never thought that it would have worked. I mean, I would have been like, if I were Kyle Katarn and the crew, I'd have been all, let's just wait and see what happens. Because I think Jarek's plan was absolute nonsense and it was never going to work. But anyway, he was supposedly going to absorb all these ghosts of dead Jedi and Sith and become, the best dark side Force user.
Which is what
ever.
they stole for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of. Except that in that one, he wasn't trying to absorb the.
No, but
Jedi
Rey
either.
does.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the idea that you have a bunch of Sith ghosts and a bunch of Jedi ghosts, and that they can manifest in one person, so that they are all the Jedi or all the Sith.
Yes, I see what you guys are saying, that they carried over that idea of absorbing. But much like the Jedi leave Rey and Palpatine can't handle all the blowback, I think that would have happened to Jarek as well. Like his body would have just exploded.
But I mean, isn't that the way with the dark side? They end up defeating themselves through, through their own arrogance.
Well, and plus they set up their own rule of 2, so that was it. You could only absorb 2 bodies. He was going to absorb more than that. Like you said, he blows up.
Yeah,
because he got greedy.
To borrow an idea from Legend of the Five Rings, no small amount of samurai influence in Star Wars anyway. Evil feeds upon itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just looked up Jarek in Fantasy Flight Games' LCG, and I definitely played with this. It was a weird game. You had to play with sets of cards within your deck. I definitely played with the Scouring the Empire set that had Jarek in it, because it was the one that gave you 2 resources on your objective instead of 1.
Yeah. The game had some good ideas.
Anyways,
it just wasn't executed all that well, and it definitely didn't feel like Star Wars. Anyway.
At times, yeah. At
all
times
right, well,
it did.
Scott got it. Scott got exactly 4. That's what Nathan said he did. So I know you guys just colluded beforehand. So
only a little, and it wasn't beforehand. It was during. I mean, we didn't collude.
Oh yeah. There's that messenger chat going on right there. I see now. Pick 4, Scott.
I mean,
pick 4.
You literally told me to feign ignorance on the last 2, and I didn't have to do that on one of them.
Yeah.
So, anyways, but I was disappointed though.
Derrick.
I was disappointed in this whole thing. He didn't mention anything about Rogue Squadron.
But was Rogue Squadron set up in that year?
There's plenty of Rogue Squadron episodes that are literally 6 months after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
and they go for several years. I
was trying to figure out when Jedi was too, because I definitely read that one.
Yeah,
with Corran Horn, who went by the name Genos Idion for a little while as an undercover operative.
Mm-hmm.
I never really read the actual Rogue Squadron books, but I read that one Kevin J. Anderson spinoff of the Rogue Squadron book.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, hats off to Mr. Miller here for a pretty well written article, but I think he's a real bit of a stretch for his headline to fit, because some of these stories, while very impactful and a lot of fun, spanned way on past the year after Return of the Jedi. I mean, several of them were very much in that one specific year within universe, but like the Dark Forces 2 thing, and of course the war with the Toph Alliance, that lasted quite a bit of time. So anyway, but these listicle articles like this, they kind of have to bend over backwards and do some mental gymnastics in order to hit the search engine optimization target phrase that they're aiming for. So there you go.
Anyways, it's still fun to talk a little bit about Legends, though, because for us, it's still partially our childhood and what we grew up knowing
Mhm.
Star Wars, even though it's not officially canon. Though again, they're pulling more and more from this, so maybe in another 20
Yeah.
years, if again they're pulling ideas because we just talked about the rise of Skywalker and the whole point of absorbing other Jedi or Sith to master power, right? So not that concept isn't even with other stuff, anyways. I mean, plenty of things of that's the whole point of Big Trouble in Little China, and absorbing demons and stuff like that. So it's not like the first time anyone's ever thought of that. So,
But this list also demonstrates why it's good that they didn't just take the expanded universe wholesale, because there's no way Luca did all of that in 1 year after the Battle of Endor. Like, clearly, a bunch of people were writing their own stories. They all had ideas of what they wanted to have happen right after the Battle of Endor, and there's no way that they all happened.
yes,
But-
but we don't know that it didn't happen.
But we do know that it can't all have happened.
I don't know. We have the world between worlds. We still don't know what that means.
Nah, you guys are missing the obvious answer as to how Luke Skywalker did all these things.
These all
Clones of Luke
Luke's.
Skywalker.
Now, see, I was going to say time dilation through hyperspace travel, but okay, yeah, that too.
Luke 1, Luke 2, Luke 3, Luke 4.
You just keep adding U's.
Yeah.
Just don't add multiple K's because that would end badly. Well,
There
anyway,
you go.
but hey, something that won't end badly is this episode of the podcast, but it's not going to end just yet because we got to do Derrick's favorite part of the show, and that is, of course, what Star Wars T-shirt are we wearing this episode? Derrick, what are you wearing?
Well, to go back to the beginning of our episode for the late passing of Carl Weathers, I wore a Baby Yoda Grogu shirt where he's drinking the
cheeky
tea or
Grogu.
soup.
Oh,
So
Aw,
obviously,
cute.
one of the first times that we obviously got to see, well, truly actually his true introduction to Cara Dune at the time. So we already had a couple of episodes of Greef Karga and Navarro, and then we get that later. But my main thing is, we are still doing the Star Wars RPG here pretty soon. Announcing to the listeners that the three of us have still thinking, we're not 100% in stone, but at this point, I've committed to buying it.
Yes.
But we're thinking about doing the Star Wars role-playing game from Fantasy Flight Games Mechanics, and actually start putting episodes out there. We'll actually try to see if we could do some campaigning between the three of us, and probably adding a fourth and fifth, just to have 4 players and a dungeon master, game master. But anyways, I found some more books today at some of my local gaming stores because it's so hard to find this. This one is not what we're doing, but it was the core rule book, and it's like $130. If you try buying it online anywhere. So at MSRP at $60, I was like, I'm getting it just in case if I decide to, expand with it. But I did also then find at another one 2 more of the source books materials for the Age of Rebellion version, which is the first one. They're both adventure books, but the first one is the Friends Like These that we have for that one. And then the other one was the Onslaught at Arda, the I or Arda 1, I'm guessing. So
Arda 1. Arda 1. Yeah.
So.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing RPG. I've never done RPG over like StreamYard or Zoom. I've just done it on Discord as voice chat. So I think we should probably investigate whether the Foundry virtual tabletop has a module for the Star Wars games from Fantasy Flight, because I hear that's a pretty good way to do a virtual tabletop.
Cool.
And Nathan and I, with our regular RPG group, have been investigating it to do. We were investigating it to do Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remaster, which we probably still will do someday. But last week, Wizards of the Coast announced that the Dungeons & Dragons official virtual tabletop would now be handled by the Foundry. So we're definitely going to get that module to plug into the Foundry, because it appears that D&D has stopped working on their own map system for virtual tabletops. I say appears. I'm not sure that's happened, but with the announcement of a third party doing virtual tabletop, I mean, at this point, they would be competing with themselves, and I don't think even Hasbro is that crazy.
I don't know.
Anyways, but yes, excellent shirt. Nathan, what shirt do you have on?
I am wearing a walking carpet shirt. My nice Chewbacca with the kind of neon old school style here. Yeah, big walking carpet.
An actual panel from a Star Wars Marvel comic from the 80s. So that's why it has that neon flavor to it, because that's a drawing from one of those books. You can tell due to Chewie's slightly odd coloration of his fur. He had some weird shades of fur in those early issues. Again, the ones that were done before the movie came out. So we don't really clear. Is he just like Sasquatch or what's the deal here? So that's how they illustrated him. Epic shirt. Epic shirt. And I am also doing a tribute to Carl Weathers with Baby Yoda here, Grogu, on my shirt in a comic booky style, very much looking like he's about to do the magic hand thing. So rest in peace, Carl Weathers. And if you guys want to get your own cool What a Piece of Junk Star Wars type related t-shirt or any other Fandom Podcast Network show, please check out the store over at tpublic.com. Just search up Fandom Podcast Network and you'll find all kinds of cool merchandise to buy. I did look up Star Wars engines, Twin Engines of Destruction. This is just a random link that I found for now this is a graded copy, graded 9.8, so very much collector version of the comic. It's $145 over at hipcomic.com. So anybody who's dying to own a spectacular mint condition, near mint condition issue of Star Wars Boba Fett Twin Engines of Destruction, there's your hookup, $145.
Yeah, but then
Anyway,
you can't read it though.
then you can't read it because you'd feel bad about taking it out of the case if you paid that much for it and it was graded so well.
You
So,
could
yeah.
get it just off eBay open for $12.
There you go. $12. That's a good price to pay for Jodo Cast. Come on.
Or you can get it for less. There's even $10, some others. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously those are original copies too. So I mean, that's almost a 30-year-old comic at this point.
Yeah.
So
Cool. All right.
anyways.
Well, Nathan, let the fans know where they can find us out there on the interwebs, please, sir.
You can find us in lots of places out on the interwebs. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, YouTube. I used to say YouTube was my favorite spot. Now I can listen to us on Spotify on the way to work. I don't know why I would since I was here for the recording, but I could, and so could you. You can also find us on Facebook, What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast. You can email us, whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. At email, we are whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. I'm sorry, I think I just said that twice. Anyways, Twitter, we're at What Wars. Instagram, Fandom Podcast Network. Apple Podcasts, if you would, please leave us a review. We would like whatever review you think we deserve, because if we need to do something better, well, we'd like to hear about that. Of course, we'd also like for 5-star reviews. And Derek, why do we like those 5-star reviews?
Well, we like 5-star reviews because we want to continue to put out content. Again, we're doing this for fun. We're not looking to make money off of it, but we do want people to come out and listen to our show. And by giving us 5 stars, it helps us in the queue when people go to these podcast apps and search for Star Wars podcasts. Obviously, the more better reviews we are and the more fresher reviews and episodes that we put out with positive reviews on and likes and all that stuff that they do, and especially in our YouTube videos as well that you can find us that you mentioned, Nathan, then obviously the space junkies out there, we can get new space junkies and hopefully addicted to What a Piece of Junk, because that's what we're here for. We want to encourage people to join us in this. Again, we get some activity over in the Facebook group, and that's a lot of fun. And again, we're doing this for you guys. And if there's, as Nathan mentioned, something we can do better or something you want to hear about, again, we try to cover everything from current Star Wars media releases for the shows and the movies. Hopefully someday we'll get a movie again. We'll find out eventually at some point, I'm guessing. But if not, we also do Legends, which we talked about today, right? So, all the fun stuff out there, and not just the media and novels and stuff, but also the card games and board games and all the fun stuff that we enjoy about Star Wars. So yes, leave us 5-star reviews for that exact reason, so that other people can find what a piece of junk.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, it was great to have this episode. Once again, rest in peace to Carl Weathers, and we will be back soon for some reviews of The Bad Batch, the final season. But until then, we want to remember to always respect each other and always respect each other's fandoms. All right, Nathan, punch it.